Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video I'd like to talk to you about the scope of your firm's operations. Broadly speaking, this boils down to how broad should your firm's operations be and what extent of the market should you cover with your company's products, services, and with your operations. This is very important to think about the company's scope of operations because your scope affects your competitive position. You can have a lot of advantages if you simply widen or if you simply lengthen the scope of your firm's operations, but with that, of course, oftentimes there also comes a cost. So in this video, I'd like to talk to you about the benefits and the downsides of increasing and of decreasing the scope of your firm's operations. So without any further ado, let's jump into the topic. I'd first like to talk to you about horizontal scope. So horizontal scope is about the breadth of your company's operations, and specifically, this means the range of products and services that you are addressing within your focal market. So your focal market is an industry, it's a sector. Think about the airline industry, think about consumer technology, think about automotive industry, whatever. So within your focal market, you can decide to increase the range of products and services that you have. And of course, you can also decide to not to. So why would you want to do this within your focal industry? Why would you want to have more types of products and services? Well, let's jump into the advantages. So sometimes you simply want to extend your business, right? You want to become a bigger business in terms of how much you sell and to which customer segments you're actually selling. Or you may simply want to extend the geographical coverage of your company. You want to become more active in certain regions, even in certain, other countries. You want to become more active, because if you're selling more types of products, more types of services, if you're active in more regions and in more countries, then with that, if your size grows as a company, of course you can become more cost efficient, right? You might be able to utilize your capacity better, and you might be able to spread your costs across so many more products, services, and types of customers. Of course, a big advantage of this as well, of becoming bigger and becoming active in so many more segments and so many more regions and countries, is that you can become more reputable, at least in terms of perception, because people see you more, they see that you're selling everywhere, that you're active everywhere, and this is very important to the consumer, to see you actually being out there in many different types of markets. Additional benefits are there if you particularly spread a lot the amount of products and services that you have, because you may want to anticipate on the death of certain industries and markets. Products and services, at least in terms of their types, are not demanded forever. Certain products, certain services, have an end of their life cycle. And when you get there, you want to be ready with the next product and next service, and increasing your horizontal scope might actually do that for you. Also, you might want to consider that certain geographical markets, grow faster than others. Certain regions are more attractive than others, and if you're active in so many more at the same time, you might actually be prepared for this. Finally, one thing that you may want to think about is a possible convergence of industries. So think about it: phones, smartphones, and tablets, right? So these are actually two types of products, but at some point we got a converged industry, which is the phablet, right? The phone that kind of is so big, has so many functionalities, that kind of is also the tablet. Or think about the laptop, and again the tablet, and the combination of this leading to the two-in-one laptop, which is a laptop, but which you also can use the touch screen of, and which you can even flip backward, and that you actually have a proper tablet. Well, when you have this, if you think that the combination of these types of products, these types of services is interesting and lucrative, then you may want to widen, again, your scope to be able to address the consumers that are interested in the combination of these two markets. Of course, for all of this, the flip side also counts. If you're not able to get these benefits through widening your scope, then you shouldn't, because widening your scope is not that easy. It requires a capital investment. So let's take this forward, and now let's talk about vertical integration, shall we? So vertical integration basically is the name we give to extending the company's scope along the industry value chain. And the industry value chain basically is, all the way from the initial sources of supply. So it basically can start from the farm and it goes all the way until the end customer, and everything in between there is the industry value chain. And if you extend your company's scope, you can go in two directions, right? You can do backward integration, which means that you're integrating towards the source of supply, or you can do forward integration, which basically means that you're going to integrate towards the end user. Backward integration could, for example, be that you're going to do your own production, and forward integration could be is that you're going to do the retailing of the products that you're actually normally only producing. So you may want to fully integrate, you may want to partially integrate vertically. Fully integration means that you have the whole industry value chain, meaning you start all the way, again, if you're thinking about agriculture, you start from the farm and all the way until the end customer, you have all parts of the value chain. If you think about partial integration, which is what most companies will opt for, you only have a certain amount of the value chain, not all of it. So what is the idea behind vertical integration? When should you do it? What's the idea behind it? With vertical integration, basically what you want to achieve is cost reduction, because you have a bigger part, and because of coordination, because of efficiencies, you may want to get cost reduction. You may want to have enhancement of technological and competitive strength, because you can use the technological abilities of whoever you're going to integrate to, perhaps through a purchase or perhaps through cooperation. You may want to achieve a certain level of differentiation, because you have a bigger part of the value chain. You can coordinate with different businesses, with different segments, and through this you might get a more different type of product, or one that is better in terms of its quality and in terms of service. For example, again, because you have control over so much more, and you can really check the quality of everything that's happening, and you can actually ensure that things are really going to go well. Also, the pace of change is important. If you have a bigger part of the industry value chain, you can also ensure that things simply go faster, because things can go more efficiently. So when should you do backward integration? And after that, of course, when should you do forward integration? So let's start with backward integration, shall we? So when you should do backward integration is, first of all, if you really can get scale economies out of doing this. So if you really can spread your costs across the operations that you will have in addition when you're doing backward integration. If you're going to, have your own farm, or if you're going to, acquire, let's say, your suppliers, is there really that much of a benefit out of it? And are you able to spread those costs, or is it going to be a liability? What's important here is that, if you're going to purchase your suppliers, or if you're going to do your supply yourself, important here, of course, that you are able to do this more efficiently than when you would, acquire things from your suppliers. So if you would go on and buy stuff rather than doing it yourself. That's the whole idea behind efficiency and behind cutting costs. If you're going to do it yourself, you need to be able to do it better, otherwise there's no point. Also important here is that your suppliers that you're normally buying your stuff from have high margins. Think about it. If they have high margins, and if you're going to do things yourself, it means there's a lot of room to cut costs through vertical integration. But if that's not the case, if they already are doing things, on a very efficient level, and if there's really no room for them to increase or decrease their prices because margins are very thin, then you acquiring or you're doing your own supplies is perhaps not that sensible. Two more points here. You might want to economize on dependency and risk, so it might be a strategic decision. If your supplies are very key for you, if it is very important that you do your own things yourself, well then, costs certainly are not that important anymore to you. You simply want to make sure that you're always able to deliver your products and services, and so that might be a reason why you may want to have your suppliers in your own control, why you may want to buy them, why you may want to acquire them. The final point is pace and flexibility, which is if you backwardly integrate, if you have control over the part that starts from your suppliers, or even before that, then of course you can ensure that because you economize on coordination costs, because you economize on communication, because you economize on all sorts of inefficiencies, you might become faster and you might become more flexible because you can maneuver much more fastly because you have a good cooperation with your supply side, which is now part of your own business. Again, the flip side counts. If all of these things you're not able to achieve, if they don't matter to you, if costs are higher than the benefits you think you're going to get, then perhaps you may not want to do this. Forward integration, as the second part of vertical integration. Why would you want to do forward integration? Well, the idea here is that first of all, if you integrate forwardly, you get closer to the end user, and with this, you can have a better interaction with the end user, and you can have better access to the end user. Why do you want this? Then, of course, is the question. Well, you can learn from them because you're talking with them. They come to your shop, they come to your factory, perhaps they see what you're doing, they give feedback through their purchases and through how they respond to, for example, your marketing campaigns. And this is, of course, very, very important information because this you can later on implement in having better campaigns and having better products and having better services. And if what you're doing is appreciated, normally speaking, the premiums per product are much higher on the consumer side of things than when you're simply selling to other businesses. So the business to consumer market might be much more lucrative because there might be a much higher premium on your product if people, of course, appreciate you. And for this, you may want to do some forward integration. Also important here is market visibility. The business to consumer market is one where oftentimes companies really get known and where you really get your visibility, and with that, where you can really spike up your brand reputation. The business to business market, even though oftentimes also lucrative, often goes at the cost of brand reputation. A big chunk of the world will not know who you are, and brand reputation might be very important to you. So certain things that you have to think about here, especially with forward integration, but also with backward integration and even with horizontal integration, is that when you integrate, you don't want to cannibalize your own operations. Okay, if you're already doing something if you're already selling, if you already have some productions, if you're already doing something well, it doesn't make sense to do this even more so if you don't need it, right? You don't need to purchase someone else for this. You don't need to develop it from the ground if you're already doing something properly. So you really have to think about, is there really going to be a big benefit through this integration that I want to do? Also think about your retailers when you're going to do, for example, forward integration. If you have retailers who are helping you sell your stuff, and if you're going to forward integrate and so have your own shop, have your own retail branch, then your retailers might get angry with you and they might actually ban you from doing still your activities. Capital investment is very important for all sorts of integration. It's not cheap, it costs money, and because of that you really have to think about, is it going to be worth it? Risk is also very important because you're going to do more, right? You're going to, and horizontally and vertically, you are deciding to do more, and with this, if you do more, the risk of not being able to do it well also is more. And so this risk part is certainly something that you have to keep in mind. And finally, if you do more, there's also the risk of becoming slower and less flexible simply because you're doing more. And this is something to keep in mind. Do I really want to do this? And will it go at the cost of my pace and at the cost of my flexibility? And so will it go at the cost of my competitive advantage? So, horizontal integration, vertical integration, we talked about it, but we didn't talk really that much about how you can do it, right? Because there are two key ways in which you can do horizontal and vertical integration. One is new business development. You can do it yourself, completely from scratch. But the other choice is often the one that's being chosen, which is through a merger and acquisition, right? So the difference between a merger and acquisition oftentimes is how much of the pie is going to stay to you. If you're going to have the biggest part of the pie after going together with this other company, after becoming one entity, then oftentimes one is acquiring the other. But if the division of ownership and control is kind of the same, then we're oftentimes talking about the merger, where you're simply becoming two kind of equal parties of the same business. So are you going to acquire someone or merge someone with someone to do something, to do horizontal and vertical integration, or are you going to do it completely yourself from scratch? That's the question. And so an M&A, a merger and acquisition, makes sense compared to new business development if you want to be fast in pushing your company's boundaries, if you don't want to lose time by new business development, by learning, because that definitely takes time, especially in areas that you're normally not that equipped with. And also, if you do an M&A, then you have to, benefit that you can get is also that you will have fast access to technologies, to resources, to capabilities, things that you normally don't have your hands on. And so it's actually because of that, very interesting to engage in an M&A rather than, developing something from scratch. There are even more possible benefits. You might have cost efficiency within your industry and even across industries if you engage in M&A. There might also be some important synergies. If you do it yourself, these might also be there. And again, as said, it will take a lot of time. And again, you might not get your hands on new technologies, capabilities, and resources. Plus, this other business might already be so much better. In going together, you might perhaps pay a price that might be so much less than actually the value of this company that you're going to merge with or acquire with, that, within or even across industries, it might make sense to share the load rather than do it all yourself. Finally, especially if you're going to expand geographically, if you don't have that much experience in internationalization, it might make so much more sense to merge with someone or to acquire someone rather than doing things yourself. Warning, M&As often yield disappointment. Oftentimes the M&A does not function well, collapses and leads to bankruptcies. Why? Well, because you expect certain benefits, you expect certain cost savings, but these many times prove to be so much less than what you expect. There might be less overlap between your business and the other business with whom you're merging or acquiring. Your resource and capabilities that you expect to acquire might not be that good as you think, or you might not be able to get your hands on it as fast as you hope. Synergies might be much less than expected. Culture might clash. Management styles might clash. And throughout the M&A process, there might be so much mistakes that you make that you cannot revoke these anymore, and that eventually this is going to blow up in your face. So it's a very important decision of whether you're actually going to merge with, or whether you're really going to acquire someone that you're going to do things yourself. You don't per se, however, have to have ownership. If you're, merging, if you're acquiring, then, with whom you're doing something, it really becomes part of yourself, right? The opposite is, of course, not doing anything else and not integrating horizontally or vertically. But there's also this other option which is called a partnership. You're partnering up with someone, but you're not forsaking your ownership and your control. You're just joining forces without really becoming a shared entity. These are strategic alliances and partnerships that I want to talk to you about. A strategic alliance is much less invasive and much less deep going in the sense that it's just a formal agreement for cooperation. So you share resources, you share control over certain locations, certain production processes, whatever. And of course you can also share your dependence, right? You might become less dependent on a certain geography, less dependent on a certain good, less dependent on a certain service. And of course, important here for the alliance or for a partnership is that there's this shared goal that you want to together go to. And a strategic alliance and partnership is much more easy to forsake, much more easy to let go. It's much less invasive. You don't become the same entity. So there are a lot of benefits if you think about it compared to a merger and an acquisition, especially if you still don't want to do things yourself, but if you kind of also find it scary to come together and marry actually with this other business. So the strategic alliance is quite relatively easy in terms of it just being a formal agreement, but a partnership becomes much more integrated because when you're talking, for example, about the joint venture as this very specific type of a partnership, oftentimes what's happening is that you have this shared new establishment. Imagine you have these two companies and they're going to engage in a joint venture. Then these two companies are going to set up this third new company, and both of them become owners of this new third partner. So with an M&A, they would become owners of each other basically. But with a joint venture, that's not the case. You get this third new entity that both together become an owner of. And so with this joint venture, actually the level of integration, the level of partnering up is much more intense. It goes much further than the alliance, but again, much less far than a merger or an acquisition. And so if you think about it, why would you want to engage in a strategic alliance, or why would you want to engage in a partnership? The benefit, of course, is kind of like with the M&A, in that you can benefit from each other's R&D, from each other's experience. You can become much more efficient, right? Because again, you share the load, you share costs, but you also share benefits, and there might be synergies that are going to let you to become a stronger, better, more efficient, and more fast-paced business. Scale economies, things that you may want to think of, that if your scale is going to increase, again, you might be able to spread your costs. And of course, market access. So these benefits are not that different from the M&A, but the things that you may want to think of is that this is a relationship that can also part. With an M&A, it's quite permanent. You're merging or you're acquiring this other business. But with strategic alliance and with a partnership, that's not really the case. It's like a friendship that might be torn apart. And with that, there are certain things that you need to keep in mind for this relationship to be healthy. You don't want to be direct competitors of each other. You want to trust each other. And of course, you want there be mutual interest, because otherwise a strategic alliance or a partnership really doesn't make that much sense. So beware, because oftentimes these partnerships, just like with the M&As, they collapse. And why that's the case is that oftentimes objectives and priorities are quite different, and so it doesn't make any sense to have actually an alliance or partnership. So the question is, why did you engage in one in the first place, right? But hey, that's not up to me. There would also be this inability to work together. Management styles, culture might again be important. Conditions might change, and with that, people might want to part. In terms of businesses might want to split because the conditions have changed and there's no need anymore for a strategic alliance or a partnership. There might be much more interesting technological paths that this one part of the partnership or of the alliance might want to pursue, and because of that may want to forego the strategic alliance and partnership. And finally, marketplace rivalry is very important here. If you become allies, you should make sure that you're not direct opponents of each other, because at some point that's going to clash, and at some point you may want to part, and at some point you may want to leave this alliance. So important here, especially compared to the M&A, is that you don't want to rely too much on each other, just in case. So make sure that you learn, even if you go together with someone. Make sure that you're learning actually from their resources, capabilities, their experience, and be always prepared for an alliance or a partnership that's actually going to part, that's actually going to fall. So the final point that I would like to talk to you about is outsourcing. You don't always have to do more, right? So sure, there's this choice of not doing anything and kind of continuing your business. There's this option of mergers and acquisitions, of the strategic alliance and partnership, horizontal, vertical integration. But you don't always have to do more. Sometimes you want to do less, and sometimes less actually is more. So sometimes you may actually want to forego attempts to perform value chain activities internally. You simply want to have someone else do them. Especially outside specialist firms or the alliances or the partnership firms that we just talked about. You can pass it on to someone else and actually become much better off in case of one of the conditions that I'm now going to spell out to you. If someone else is able to do certain tasks in a cheaper way or in a better way, that makes sense for this other party to actually do it. Also, especially if what you're talking about in terms of a resource or capability is not a crucial one, right? If it's not key, if it is not central to your business model or business, if there's much more something supporting in terms of your value chain, you may want to pass it on to this other business to economize on your costs. And to perhaps be much faster in that being done. And this might actually help you focus on your core business, because you can spend all your resources and capabilities in that particular area. Finally, one hopes, of course, that outsourcing leads to an increased flexibility and increased pace, because you become much more focused, much more specific as a business, a no-nonsense type of a business. You become more lean, and everything that's actually not crucial and key, you let others do, you outsource it, and with that, you hope to become, again, a better company, as you can focus much better on actually your core identity, your core business model. Risks, as always, also with outsourcing. You might outsource the wrong activities. So you might outsource actually key resources, key capabilities, key activities, and so a key part of your business model. And that's not good, because others can imitate you if you outsource that. Or your quality, flexibility, and your pace, so the fastness with which you're going to do things, that might drop. And that's of course also a major headache to you, right? Because these other parties that you're working with, to whom you're outsourcing, they might not be as good in doing the job as you are. That was actually your reason of existence, your value proposition. And so these key parts you should not outsource. Only, ideally speaking, secondary parts of your value chain you should. Finally, if you're going to outsource parts that are actually closely in line with your end customer, think about service, think about marketing, you might lose touch with your customer. Your customer might not remember you, might not recognize you, might not like you anymore that much, because this other party might care simply less about your end customer, and with that might not have that extra touch, that extra finesse that normally you had when you were communicating and accessing the end customer. And because of that, you might also especially want to think twice about whether you're actually going to outsource the front end of your business. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. I wish you all the best in the world, and again, hope to see you anytime soon. Take care.